Welcome back to Zelda 2. I'm kicking things off from the castle today. Since we have everything we need to tackle the third palace, I'm going to go straight there. Now, to get to the third palace, it's a little weird. The people in the town tell you to go all the way back to Ruto and ask Error about the palace, and he will tell you to go south of the King's Tomb. I think that's how it goes. I already know all of this stuff, so I know to just go straight there anyways. But that's a little weird to make you go all the way back to Error for that. Anyways, we're in the graveyard now. The grave in the very center of that little clearing is the King's Tomb. You can actually go there and talk to an NPC, but you just head directly south and hope that you don't get an encounter on the tile that you're supposed to step on. And when you step on the correct tile, you'll get this weird falling animation, and you'll be in a cave, and you have to have the fairy spell here because it's the only way to get over this cliff. Kind of annoying, honestly. Like, you have to spend a chunk of magic just to advance the game. That's what I was talking about when I said this game sometimes makes you spend MP, like, just to advance forward. Now, that isn't that bad here because you can use the red jar that you get at the start of the palace to refill your magic. But the annoying thing is that the statue that you have to hit, sometimes it can turn into an enemy. And if that happens, you can simply exit and re-enter the palace until the statue does not turn into an enemy. I messed up there, by the way. If you leave the screen too early after killing an enemy, the EXP won't be added to your total, because you have to wait for the little animation. Kind of annoying to have that happen, but that's fine. So I'm okay starting Palace 3 with full life and not completely full magic, but that's okay. New enemy here, he hops around and throws clubs that actually function like boomerangs. I don't really know how that works. Magic clubs, I guess. I don't really know why I bothered fighting him. And this enemy, it's exactly like a Stalfos. It can even downstab, but it's a little bit stronger. I don't know why they created an entirely new sprite for it. I guess they ran out of colors. Because there's going to be a red variant later on, and the red variant, you actually encounter the red variant second. It's weaker than the blue variant, which is really weird. And these enemies on the floor are being annoying. You're supposed to use the downstab to get rid of them, but that can sometimes crush the block, and you kind of don't want that to happen. Like, if you just stab through the enemy and crush the block beneath you, that's going to be really annoying. So, moving forwards, we haven't really seen that much yet. It's basically just a straight shot until you find the first elevator. There's a key that you have to use the downstab to get. That's an interesting thing about this palace, by the way. It's kind of getting you to use the downstab in a couple of different ways. To dig down and get items, to attack enemies from above. Like, it treats the downstab almost like you would expect a dungeon in a modern Zelda game to treat the item for that dungeon. Because, like, typically, like, you don't even notice it, but sometimes there's a little tutorial on how to use the item in the form of a puzzle that you have to use to escape the room, something like that. Anyways, this room, I kind of did something a little bit embarrassing. I accidentally crushed through too many blocks, and now I'm actually unable to advance with this room. And I had to waste time killing that enemy, and I'm going to waste time trying to crush blocks and potentially get out of here, but this just leads to another enemy in a dead end, so I can't do that. It would be really nice if you could stab upwards, but we don't exactly have that yet. So I have to exit and re-enter the area, and I would have just used the jump spell to get out of here, but I actually don't have enough magic. I actually, like, spent all of my magic on... What did I spend it on? I must have spent it on a life spell or something. Anyways, moving on, we finally have the first elevator, so this is the first path split. I'm gonna go to the right first. This is actually a pretty linear palace. It doesn't really have a lot of confusing turns or anything. But one thing that is annoying is how you get out of here without the jump spell. It's so specific what you have to do. You have to move specifically in the way that I did, because that will build up enough momentum to let you clear the jump. And this room is actually outside, which is interesting. Like, I'm pretty sure we went underground, so if there's an outside room on this palace, like, this palace is in the middle of an island, so I guess we're just outdoors now. I don't know why we couldn't have entered from this area, but whatever. I unfortunately took a death because I wasted too much life fighting the enemies, yada yada yada. And it's mostly just red Iron Knuckles in this palace, along with some ghosts that leave those flames, but this one isn't really doing a whole bunch to make this fight harder. In fact, once you push the Iron Knuckle all the way to the platform with a key, you can just bounce on him, grab the key, and then get out of here. So yes, you have to get that key. Well, you don't technically have to get that key if you just use the fairy spell, because the fairy spell can get you through locked doors. Well, if you unlock this door, then you would have to fairy again on the way back, because I think you have to backtrack through this room. And, yeah, I think in this area I got a little bit confused. Like, I don't know if I wrote down notes for the path that I'm supposed to take through the dungeons, and I think I got a little confused by my own notes, which is probably not a good sign. But yes, this is a dead end. I can at least kill the enemy now, because big enemies like the red Iron Knuckles, they actually stay dead. Small enemies like the blobs and the floating heads and stuff, they'll respawn, but the red Iron Knuckles won't, so killing them at some point is probably a good idea, just to get them out of the way. Alright. Now I'm finally moving in the right direction. That blue magic jar drop was a bit fortuitous. I don't know if I've mentioned it yet, but apparently the blue magic jars can block some projectiles. It's really weird. Like, you would have to get very lucky to see it, of course. So this room has a lot of lava pits and enemies that are just begging to push you into them. But you can also push the enemy into lava pits. I think I do it with this red Iron Knuckle. Now, you might think to use the fairy spell to just fly over all of this, but they actually did kind of a jerk thing. Because if you fly all the way to the right in this room, you'll find this row of blocks that you have to crush to get through. The fairy cannot crush the blocks. So what that means is if you fairy in that room, you actually have to backtrack all the way out and you're down a bunch of MP. It's really awful. Like, you can't turn off the fairy spell. There's no way to do that. I wish there was, but then I guess rooms like that would be far more trivial. So this dungeon also introduces the blue Iron Knuckle. This is a very big step up from the red Iron Knuckle that I'm just going to jump over him, of course. So, the blue Iron Knuckle, you can see... This is the dungeon item, by the way. It's a raft. Yet another Zelda game with a raft as a dungeon item. I don't know why Link just doesn't make his own. So you can see that the blue Iron Knuckle is very annoying because it actually throws swords, and they are much, much faster than just hitting you with a sword like the red ones do. But something that you might have noticed in the very tight corridor that I jumped over and through the very stupid enemy, by the way. He just walks into the lava. So with the blue Iron Knuckle, you could see that I jumped and then down thrusted in the air and then just passed right through the guy. I actually could have killed the blue Iron Knuckle that way. The thing is, what you have to do is you have to actually rapidly tap the down button. Because what happens is every time you tap the down button, that's considered a new attack. So you're just going to slash at the enemy multiple times when you pass through them like that. That's called a jackhammer, and you see speedrunners do it occasionally. So to the guy who said in the previous video's comments that jackhammering was impossible and you do not down thrust the blue Iron Knuckles, you've just been proven wrong. I'm kidding, of course. Like, if I had actually known to do that at the time of this recording, then I definitely would have demonstrated, but whatever. So as we fight through more red Iron Knuckles, we have what's actually a very annoying room, because there are these floating heads, they constantly spawn, they're like those, flying heads from the previous palace, and what you have to actually do here is you have to downstab into this little room where there's a key, and then you have to crush blocks to get all the way out. And I was like, no way, I'm not doing that. I've got a path out of here. I'm just gonna use the fairy spell to make this easier on myself, which is probably what you should do too if you've got the magic for it. Of course, you would probably have to, like, spend some time farming blue magic jars. I think the way those jars work is that... I should actually look this up, but I think the way those jars work is that every 6 enemies killed, you have a chance of getting either a magic jar or an experience point bag. And to be honest, if I was going to use the fairy spell to get out of that room with the key, then I probably should have just used it to float through the door instead of just grabbing the key in order to unlock it. But whatever, can't really do anything about it now. In fact, the boss, I think, is right behind this door. No, one more room until the boss, okay. And this room's got even more Iron Knuckles and hard jumps to make. Now you can avoid the blue one entirely because he won't start attacking unless he actually sees you, so if you keep that row of blocks there, then he won't see you and you'll be perfectly safe against this red Iron Knuckle. You more or less have to fight this red Iron Knuckle normally. These quarters are far too tight in order to be able to jackhammer him like I could have with the blue Iron Knuckle earlier. You need like a block above your head open in order to be able to jackhammer. So yes, in this room I was totally worried about what I was going to do against the boss, because with only one hit point and one magic point, there's no way I'm surviving this fight. So I'm taking the death. I still have one life left. I should be able to handle the boss with this amount of magic and health. So yes, I'm going to activate the shield spell, and the way this boss works is that you have to actually use the down stab against him as well. So he's a blue Iron Knuckle on a sort of chariot or something. Kind of a metal horse or something. Anyways, the idea is to bounce on him as he is charging across the room. His speed is actually determined by the distance between you and him, so it's actually possible to get him to stop while he's on screen, and then you can just jump on top of him and then constantly bounce on his head, stabbing him over and over. And I think that would continue happening even after he has lost his horse, because when he reaches half health, he will actually fall off his horse, get all of his health back, and then he's just a regular blue Iron Knuckle. Which is actually kind of disappointing, because you'd expect a boss like this to be more than just a regular enemy with a ton more health. So yes, this got a little bit tense. Fighting these guys is always difficult for me, because you could just constantly block his swords over and over and wait for an opening, but he's so fast with his swords that he rarely leaves an obvious opening for you. So I had to use the life spell, and also another problem is that you can push him off screen and then you have to go back to the other side of the room in order to get him back on the screen. It's just really annoying. Like, I probably should have mastered jackhammering in order to make this a little bit easier. Would have saved me some health too, because after this boss, I've actually got, let's see, at this point I have 1091 EXP, and I need to pass 1500 if I want the crystal to give me a free attack level. So now I'm up to, like, just shy of 1500. So I'm thinking, should I actually just take the crystal and gain like 100 EXP, which is like one red Iron Knuckle? Or do I go back, fight that blue Iron Knuckle, and risk all of my EXP for the chance to pass 1500 and get a free attack level? Well, you can see which one I went with. Yep. I had enough for a shield spell, which would give me one hit against the blue Iron Knuckle. But I managed it. So that was maybe a bit reckless, and probably should have just exited the dungeon, and, well, I would have to backtrack all the way to the town. And that would take a little while, too. But maybe I could have just done some grinding in the desert or something. I don't know. Like, maybe... Actually, maybe, like, get a red magic jar from the beginning of the palace, and then maybe have it intentionally turn into an enemy in order to get the EXP off of that. I don't know. It's not worth talking about now. So, up +8 shortcut to get back to the castle, and then I can show you all what the raft is for. Because the raft, again, is a required item. You have to get it. Like, not all of the dungeon items are required. You could skip the candle if you wanted to, but that would make the dark caves really, really awful to get through, so I would not recommend it. So, with a raft, all you have to do is touch this dock, I guess it is, and shove off for the other dock on the opposite side of the ocean. Now we are in the second half of the game, which means the enemies are going to get tougher, and they've actually just now introduced an enemy that your sword can't really kill. So you need something else in order to kill it, and luckily this first town is going to give us exactly that. This is the town of Naboru. Another name from Ocarina of Time, and this is nowhere near the desert, so it doesn't exactly make all that much sense. Anyways, getting the spell in this town is actually not hard at all. It's practically free, and it's kind of silly, in fact. See, I thought this woman here was the healer, so I talked to her, but she's not going inside, so I figure this must be the lady that I have to talk to get the spell, and her entire problem is that she's thirsty. Well, let me save you a short few steps from going to the water fountain to get some water. And that's literally the crux of this quote-unquote side quest. So I actually learned something really weird. This is actually the first spell in the game to actually require you to have a magic container in order to get it. See, from here on out, the spells will require you to have magic containers in order to learn them. This spell requires you to have one magic container, the 6th spell requires you to have 2, the 7th requires you to have 3, and the final spell requires you to have all of the magic containers. I knew about the final spell requiring all the magic containers in order to get it, because I figured it's such an expensive spell that they want you to have the maximum MP in order to get it. but what I didn't realize is that the other spells require you to have magic containers as well. So, I don't know why they did it that way. I always get all of the magic containers as soon as I can, so it doesn't really come up until the final spell. So, that's really strange. Anyways, the spell I just got, it allows your sword to shoot fireballs, which you'd think would be cool, but again, it's expensive. MP is a precious resource, and there aren't really a lot of enemies that require you to... First of all, there aren't a lot of enemies that require fire to be killed in the first place. Second, you can pretty much skip all of the enemies that require you to use fire to kill them anyways. They're not going to stand in your way. So that would have been an annoying spell. That enemy, for example, that was one of the ones you need fire to kill. I just bounced past him. So it's a good thing you can bounce past them. The thing is, the 6th spell, it is also required to take out not only some enemies, but a boss as well. So that's doubly annoying. So just moving through the desert here, there are some forced encounters, which these are actually really fillery because it's nothing but Octoroks. You should be well acquainted with Octoroks by now. Like, they were all over the swamp areas. And there's just some deadly water that you're gonna fall into if they decide to knock you off. And then there's a second forced encounter, which is exactly the same thing, except now there's deadly bubbles. Some of the stuff in this game I don't really get. So we're on our way to another town, but the thing is, I actually thought that I would have to go to this town right now because there's another sword technique you can get in this town. I wonder what that sword technique is going to be. You probably guessed already. We have the down stab, and we're going to get the Upthrust now. I should really not call it the Upthrust. I should think of another word for it. But there's also a magic spell in this town, however you have to do something elsewhere in the game in order to get it. I thought you needed the Upthrust in order to do that thing, but it turns out, no, you don't. So I could have just gone to where you have to pick up something, and then come back and get the Upthrust and the spell, and then gone back to the palace. But whatever, what's done is done. I'll just save you guys the time through video editing. So in this town, there is a house with no way through the door, but it has a chimney above it. So what you're supposed to do is actually jump on the rooftops of the buildings and go down the chimney, which you can either make a Santa Claus joke or you can make a Mario joke, because going down the chimney like that, that looks so much like Mario going down a pipe. Like, all you need is the Mario sound effect for going down a pipe, and I think that scene is complete. But if you go inside, you will find another knight. This one's got a spear, but he's going to teach us the Upthrust. Now we're able to stab in 2 different directions in the air, and it's going to be very useful in the coming dungeons. Because the palace, I think it requires you to have this in order to get a specific key, but we'll talk about that later. So the Upthrust has also been seen in Smash Bros. And Soul Calibur 2. That's another move that gets added to Link's moveset. And that's all there is to the town of Darunia. I did not mention that this town was called Darunia, and it's in the mountains, so this town name finally makes sense. It was named after the mountain sage, the Goron, etc. So what you need to do now is actually rescue a kidnapped child on the Maze Island. So we'll be heading to an island that has a giant labyrinth on it, which is really interesting. That's kind of an interesting setting. So we'll be heading all the way over there, and I have to go through all of the encounters all over again. I probably should have cut this part out as well, but I suppose I'll talk a little bit about grinding in Zelda 2. So despite the fact that the game actually takes away all of your EXP if you get a game over, I wouldn't say there's a huge amount of grinding you have to do in Zelda 2, as long as you're careful. Like, just going through the palace gives you a bunch of EXP off the really strong enemies. And you can also get those experience point bag drops, and if you, the random encounters actually at this point have some enemies that are very easy to destroy and give a lot of EXP. Like in this area, well, not in the forest encounters, but in the plains encounters, there is an enemy that flies through the air and drops rocks on you. You can, as soon as you have the Upthrust, you can stab that enemy for an instant 50 EXP. And that's actually pretty good. I think if you get a random EXP bag off of it, then it will give you 200 points. So that's a pretty good place to grind if you feel the need to do that. And you might feel the need to do that at this point, especially if you're behind on levels. Also in this area, the desert, those levers that come out of the ground, they're worth decent EXP as well. So you cross that bridge and you're into the Labyrinth Island. Now there are some forced encounters here, but I think you can avoid them for the most part as long as you take the most, if you don't try to take any shortcuts through the maze, then you won't find any forced encounters, and the encounters aren't even that difficult anyways. Like, you might run into a few enemies that you have to use the fire spell to kill, but again, you can just walk past them and everything's fine. You don't have to spend the MP on it. So there's two important things to find in this maze. One is the child, of course. We have to save the children. That's very important. But also, if you walk into that area, you will fall down a hole and find magic container number 7. Or 3. It's the third container, but it puts you at 7 bars of magic. I don't know. So the only thing we need now is the child, and he's tucked away in a very deep corner in the maze. Now, the palace is also on this island, and something that I didn't really realize at the time was, like, obviously you need the reflect spell to kill the boss of this palace. I already told you that. Oh, speaking of which, by the way, this is I think this is a Lizalfos. I'm not sure. But it has a spear, and it basically works exactly like the Iron Knuckle, and there's the child. So that child has something really funny to him in the Japanese version of the game. So in the Japanese version, you couldn't pick up items like that by just touching them. You actually had to stab them. So Link has to stab the child. Now, don't worry, the child is actually tied up in ropes in the Japanese version, so it's clear that you're slashing the ropes in order to free him, but still, it looks kind of weird. And what's also funny is, like, the child is treated as an inventory item, so you kind of have to make believe that Link is carrying the child through all of these enemies and all of the stuff that you have to fight through to get back to the village. That's kind of weird. Then again, I guess it's also weird that Link holds the child over his head in the US version, so, I don't know. Let's just go and get the reflect spell now. I've jump cut all the way over here, and I will jump cut back to the Maze Island, because after this it will be time for the palace. Now, I already mentioned that in order to clear the palace and beat the boss, you have to have the reflect spell, but you can actually go in the palace, get the dungeon item, and then save the child and get the magic container all in one trip, and then up plus A out of there, head back to the village, get the reflect spell, and then go back to the palace and beat the boss. Like, you can do it that way if you want to save a little bit of time. Like, that would be the super optimal way of doing it, but I just kind of did it the suboptimal way, because I haven't done this part of the game in ages, I suppose. Even though I played through the game once already before recording, I guess. Anyways, the dungeon item for this palace is a pair of boots that will let you walk on water, but only on specific tiles of water. So, like, the water that makes up the river in the Maze Island, that can be walked on with the boots, so that creates a shortcut out of here, which is very convenient and courteous of the developers. They can be nice sometimes, but at other times, they're actually pretty mean. In fact, this dungeon is where the mean stuff starts, as soon as I get past all of these encounters. And I think I'm going to also continue my attempt to get to attack 8 as soon as possible. So I'm not going to take any levels until the crystal has been put in place and I have attack level 7. So that's kind of gutsy. But I think with Magic 4 and Life 5, I'm pretty comfortable with those numbers at this point. And besides, I can restore all of my magic with a red jar at the beginning of the palace. So I just have to go through this very annoyingly winding path. Honestly, yeah, I'm picking my poison here. Either I can take the annoyingly winding path, or I can just face the forced encounters and potentially lose more health. So, yep, here we are in the 4th palace. It is very purple. Well, purple it is. I suppose, I guess if the architect of this place wanted to add some color, then, you know, purple's fine. Purple bricks, I never thought I'd see that. So the new enemy we are going to be introduced to is the Wiz Rope, which might look a little politically incorrect, but don't try to think about it too hard, okay? So this enemy, he's very closely guarding that experience point bag, so I just decided to move past him. Like, I don't need to deal with those guys. Alright, so the first thing to do is to go left, and there will be some enemies in your way. That was very embarrassing. I should not have gotten hit there. Can you block the Stelthos sword with your shield? I don't actually know. It would make sense if you could. So after taking this very big leap, you don't want to fall down there quite yet. You're supposed to fall down there, but not yet. Head further to the right, and some more annoying pitfall traps. Like there's lava beneath you, there's this enemy, and I'm probably just going to jump over him at this point. I've got the magic for it, or at least I would have if he didn't solve my problem for me by apparently just disappearing and falling into the lava. Well, okay then. There's also a magic jar here. Like, I don't need it now. I guess I could recover all of my health and then fill up with the magic jar. So, now I have to actually fight this enemy because it doesn't look like he's going to... Yeah, that gave me a heart attack when I was recording. I was like, oh my god, I'm going to fall into the lava, but luckily I was saved. Moments like that, I guess, are part of the appeal of Zelda 2, or any Castlevania game. So, unless you want to spend MP on the fairy spell in order to get back up there, I would suggest falling down here, because you're actually supposed to fall down here next. Like, fall down one level and head to the right. Actually, that makes this the first Zelda game to have falling through a hole to a level further down as a game mechanic. That was part of A Link to the Past, and it's probably part of other Zelda games too. So yet another blue Iron Knuckle that I could jackhammer if I knew how to do that technique. But instead, I'm just going to push past him, get through that locked door, and get the item, which is the boots, like I mentioned. The first boots that you ever get in Zelda, predating the Pegasus Boots, and I'm just finding things to talk about in order to fill the dead air as I try to fruitlessly fight past this guy. Alright, so at this point, you could actually up+A out of the palace if you wanted to, because I really just have to backtrack to the entrance to the dungeon, and then I also thought there would be a magic jar in that statue. It didn't work out that way, unfortunately. So that was a big waste of MP. Yeah. Alright, so moving on. Yeah, I'm not going to up+A because I now have 1500 EXP. I don't think I'm going to earn that much if I start from the beginning of the dungeon. So I just fall down here. You don't want to fall again because there's lava, and that gave me another heart attack. The Medusa heads are back, everybody. Medusa heads, that one Bullet Bill-like enemy from the first Mega Man. Like, I think this is an enemy type that a lot of developers really wanted to, like, use very often. It's weird. Unfortunately, I did in fact die here, but I've got 2 lives left. Everything is fine. I will be perfectly okay, and the boss is really, really easy, so I don't really need a spare life for him, at least. Also, I don't know what's up with those fires. You just have to crush the blocks and jump over them. Really weird. So moving on. This bubble is also annoying. Have you noticed that they bounce off the edges of the screen as well? So you can kind of control where they go. But you definitely don't want to let them out of the pit down below, because then you'll have to deal with them while you're doing the platforming, and I probably should have just killed the thing. I think I have enough attack levels where it wouldn't take that many hits. I'm not even sure they're supposed to be killable, but, you know, you just give them 255 HP. That technically counts as a health bar. And they were given an EXP payout, so I don't know. So here are the Wiz Robes. I think they're Wiz Robes. I don't know for sure. But you can block their spells, and they only fire their spells at one height, so they're really not that threatening unless they decide to teleport on top of you. But if you have the Reflect spell, you can cast that. In fact, I'm actually going to do it. And you can bounce their magic right back at them, and that'll give you 100 free EXP. Not really worth the MP that you have to spend in order to, like, actually cast the spell. And speaking of MP, again, this room is just like the one in Palace 3. I'm gonna get the key, and then... Oh no, please tell me I used the fairy to get out of here. Okay, good. These enemies also drain your EXP if you touch them, so watch out for that. But now I have 0 MP, so I think this is the point where I decided to backtrack to the entrance to the palace and try to grind off that statue to get more red magic jars. I think that's what happens. Yeah, I just jump cut. So that's exactly what I did. I just repeatedly slashed the statue until I got the red magic jar. So, moving on. That room that I was just in, it's the one immediately after the palace entrance, in case you got confused. So you have to use the Upthrust to get that key, but actually I think the speedrunners have a way to skip the Upthrust and get it without getting the Upthrust, so I don't know. Like, I'm not super knowledgeable of speedrun strats. I'm just pointing these out because, oh, hey, that's an interesting thing they do. I should probably mention it. Because, you know, it's interesting what develops when people spend enough time playing this game over and over again. Or any game, really. Like, speedruns of Super Mario Bros. 2 actually fascinated me for a while because they do a lot of really cool stuff with that game. Alright, so I've more or less just trapped that enemy in a short one-block pit. Anyways, I should have used the fairy spell to get out of here, but for some reason I thought, since there weren't any enemies spawning near me, I thought, you know, I should just get out of here the normal way and save myself the MP. So I apologize, I'm going to take such an enormous amount of time just crushing all of these blocks, but I guess I should show what they intend for you to do in order to get out of these rooms. Jeez, I can't believe they intended it. And I think I've got the jump spell activated, so I could have just up-thrusted through some of the blocks. No, I didn't have the jump spell on, but I could have just up-thrusted at some point in order to crush through the blocks that way. So with all of that out of the way, it's time to start moving towards the boss. And he is to the left, I think. There's going to be a key door here. I've got a key, though. Moving on, we have, oh yeah, another room with crumbling blocks and lava pits, and enemies that you have to downstab in order to kill. Not that hard to kill them and move on, though. Unfortunately, I ran into a roadblock here because, yet again, there's a locked door, and I forgot to get the key on the right side of this level. And I don't have enough MP to ferry through it. I would have just used the ferry to get through it, but I did not have enough MP. I am just shy. It's all very unfortunate. And that blue magic jar dropping, if that blue magic jar had dropped just one enemy sooner, I would have been able to use the fairy spell to get through there. So, my apologies to all of the viewers. I guess I have to subject you to backtracking and then going to where the key actually was and then coming back. I am so sorry. Maybe I should have edited this out. Now, I probably should have left it in for context. Yeah. So yes, now we've got the lava pits and the bridge and everything, and we've got the little fires that you have to crush the blocks to get past, and throw in the flying Medusa head stone statue heads on top of that. That was another heart attack, by the way. I thought for sure I was going to get hit and fall into the lava. Unfortunately, they're going to do enough damage to me that, like, I don't have enough magic for the life spell, by the way. So they unfortunately do enough damage to me. Actually, it's not them that does enough damage. The statue at the end turns into an enemy and kills me. But hey, they get to me on the other side of the room just a little bit quicker. I got the key. I'm not worried. Now that I actually have the key, and enough magic to use the fairy spell twice if I want to, it's time we just move through all of this and get to the end of the palace. Because we're almost to the end. All we have to do is kill a very, very easy boss. Okay, so moving through all of this again. Just head down the elevator and put the key in the hole. And I think there's a couple of enemies on the way. Like there's a Stalfos all the way up there for some reason. I don't know why they think that's a threat at all. There's a point bag if you want to get it. I've got enough experience points so I don't need it. The red Iron Knuckle was all the way at the top of the room there for some reason. I don't really understand that, but there's going to be another one coming up. And, do I actually kill this one, or do... Oh, yeah, I kill him. I kill him in 2 hits now, of course. So, yes, using that ever-present magic jar trick to get more MP out of the magic jar than, I was supposed to. Now we're finally to the boss, and, all you have to do with this boss is you cast the reflect spell, and then you just hide in the corner, duck and block, and, the enemy will kill himself for you. Of course, he might teleport onto you, which can damage you, but... Other than that, this is just the easiest thing in the world. I have no idea why they thought this boss was a good idea. Like, required reflect spell, there's no way to damage him other than the reflect spell. Just not a good idea. But, I'm going to get attack level 7 from this crystal, and that's 4 palaces down and only 2 more to go. So next time, we are going to head to the Water Temple. It's not actually the Water Temple, but you do have to cross water to get to it, so I kind of like making that joke. So, see you for part 4, everybody.